Yes, so we have Vajradevi with us tonight, who's kindly come to speak to us. Vajradevi's written a book called Uncontrived Mindfulness, which will be out very shortly, if it's not out already. Yeah, there you are, you can see it. She's going to be talking about her book, so plenty of opportunity to find out about that. I'll just say a few words about Vajradevi. She's not a stranger to the Bristol Buddhist Centre because she has been here before. So some of you will remember from a couple of years ago, Vajradevi was here and she led Rain's retreat, just as the one that's coming up in a week or so's time. It was Vajradevi who came a few years ago to do that, and it was an excellent retreat and very much enjoyed by everyone. So yeah, what can I say about Vajradevi? Well, I don't know her very well personally at all, but she has been around the movement a long time. I know that because I remember her face from years ago. She's been working for the movement in various different ways for Triratna over those years. She was someone who was very instrumental in getting the project of Akashavana, which is the women's retreat center in Spain, which is where women's ordinations take place. And I remember her giving talks then. She gave one in Cambridge years and years ago about fundraising for that project when it was first kicking off. So I think she worked for that for 7 years, I think, the Akashavana project. And the Akashavana is now well established and serving the movement and women who are getting ordained. And she worked in right livelihood business. So she worked at the Cherry Orchard in London and various other endeavors around the movement. And I think she worked with Sri Mala for a while, who was very involved with the women's ordination process. She was Sri Mala's secretary. Yeah. So a big welcome to Vajradevi, and I'm very interested to hear about her book. I know a little bit from when she came to visit about her kind of explorations, so I am interested to hear more about that. So hand over to you, Vajradevi.
Thank you, Naravira. Thank you. Okay, let's just go to a gallery view. Okay, great. It's very good to be here. See you all. And yeah, I think maybe I'll just start off just for a couple of minutes in a way, carrying on from Naravira introducing me and sort of introducing myself, but more in the area of, in a way, what's led me to writing this book. And yeah, there are different strands. I did an interview with Dhamma Mega, the director of Windhorse Publications, and there I said I definitely felt that there was a myth of the writer was quite alive in me, and I'd been writing since I was a kid, various different ways. But really, this book has come out of me following a strand in my practice of Satipatthana. Initially, I didn't know it was Satipatthana, the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness. It was the way it was taught to me. It was taught without a lot of theory around it. So it was really just a practice of attending to what was happening. So very direct mindfulness practice. And I just followed my nose with that throughout various teachers, sometimes teaching with people like Vidyamala. We taught together at Taraloka. I'm sure many of you will be aware of Vidyamala. And also exploring outside of Triratna with, in particular, a Burmese teacher called Sayadaw U Tejaniya. So when I went to talk with Bhante about all this, and he said he was very keen that I brought it back into the movement, brought back what I was learning. And so there's been this process of sort of integrating really what I'm learning with how we or within, well, how we practice within our context. So I'll say a little bit about that, about where I see the overlap, if you like. But maybe before that, just to say, so the book is out. It came out on the 31st of March, so it's been just over a month that it's been out, and it's really I'm writing about a particular approach to working with mindfulness. There are many different ways, even within the Buddhist tradition, of taking the teachings of the Satipatthana Sutta, which has got so much in it, and practicing, and they don't necessarily overlap. You can some of the ways are really quite distinctive and distinct from each other. This particular approach that I've been practicing, and that's what I've chosen to write about. So it emphasizes direct experience over reflective thinking or thinking about something. It's really about attending to your experience through the senses, and particularly the mind sense, actually. That doesn't mean it's making some sort of distinct separation between body and mind, but it's sort of saying, if you can, if you're with the mind sense, you can be aware of whatever else is happening through the physical senses. Great, there's a link to the book. Well, yeah, that's it. So there's that aspect, this emphasizing the direct experience, what's actually happening within the senses. Another feature, I'd say, of it is that it's a receptive approach. So I use this phrase, being settled back or resting back. So really sort of letting experience come to you rather than reaching out. So it's much less of an active or doing approach, if you like. We're much more looking to observe what happens in experience, what the body and mind naturally do when we get ourselves out of the way. And thirdly, it's an approach that emphasizes wisdom. It emphasizes mindfulness, working with panya or pranya. So I'll touch on these aspects as in what I'm going to say this evening. The main attraction for me actually was this coming together of mindfulness with a wisdom approach or a Dharma perspective. And there's a lovely word in a lovely Pali word that sums it up. It's satipanya. Satipanya, mindfulness, little plus sign, wisdom. Yeah, and it's a compound term. So it's where those two things really come together. Yeah, and maybe the last thing I'll say about it is a practice of watching the mind. Yeah, really watching the mind. Sometimes I imagine myself, or I use the image of being in a bird hide, where there's maybe you're sitting in a small space, but you've got quite an expanse. Things can be happening over the whole sort of range of. I've got this particular hide in mind, which is right next to the sea. So it's got wetlands and reeds, and various birds fly in from the sea, and then birds live there on the land. And in order to be able to notice what happens, let me put it the other way. If you focus in one particular area, you miss what's happening. If you're focusing on the reeds, then maybe you just miss that small movement, which is some exotic bird that's flying away, as exotic as they get in East Anglia. Anyway, so the idea is that you have this really soft, broad mindfulness that's able to take in what's happening, and it's able to be very flexible and responsive to whatever is happening within the field of vision. So if you take that as a metaphor for the mind and for the mindfulness, how we are watching the mind is with those same qualities of breath and a relaxed, natural awareness. So I'm going to say a couple of things about our context where perhaps those qualities fit into, well, firstly into the main practices that we do perhaps in the first few years within Triratna, mindfulness breathing, metta bhavana, and then the third one, just sitting. So I think this practice, Satipatthana practice in general, but particularly a more receptive approach to Satipatthana, is akin to just sitting. It's not the same. I think Satipatthana is like a map of the mind. So it's got a lot of different pointers. It's got different sort of continents and countries sort of sketched in. Whereas just sitting, I think, is or often has very little instruction with it. I know that Subhuti quotes the instruction that Bhante Sangharakshita gave him as, when you're just sitting, you just sit. That was it. But it had a very profound effect on Subhuti because that's what he did. He just sat with his experience. So I think there's a shared element of receptivity in just sitting and this type of receptive mindfulness. And then the other place perhaps where I can place what I'm talking about is within our mandala of practice. So these 5 aspects of practice. So there's integration, positive emotion, spiritual rebirth. And all of those, if you like, have their place within this practice. Definitely sort of integration and positive emotion are cultivated. And there are fruits of practice. But the 2 main aspects, one, which maybe is a bit obvious from what I've said already, is spiritual receptivity. That's the method. That's the how we're working in the practice. But the results are more in the area of spiritual depth, the 5th aspect. So spiritual depth is often talked about as insight or wisdom. So it's an insight practice, though, as with a lot of insight practices, it depends a lot on setting up of conditions, setting up of the conditions of integration, the conditions of positive emotion, and in this case, the condition of mindfulness. So I want to say, I don't know if I've got time to say 3 or 4 things about mindfulness and also to say a little bit about the book. So I'll jiggle it as I go along. If there are 4 things, there's a little list of 4 things, and 4 things that define right mindfulness. And I talk about those in the 2nd chapter in the book. This is not me defining them, it's the Buddha defining them, and they're dotted through the Pali Canon, these 4 qualities, but I'm just putting them in my own words for now. And they represent mindfulness at its most developed. And some, if not all of them, are touched by wisdom, or touched by a Dharma perspective. And some it's more obvious than others. So the first one, which is, I'm sure you've got this sense from what I've said already. So mindfulness always happens in the present moment. So simply knowing, and you can tune into this now as I'm speaking, just tune into the fact that while you're listening, you can also know what's happening to some degree in your body. So that's that touch, the touch sensations will be happening. Yeah, perhaps there's your posture, perhaps different parts of your body are quite warm, perhaps others not so warm, maybe there's an achy bit. I can feel a little bit of stiffness in my back from sitting on the cushions. So there's a lot that we can know. In the present moment, we're not confined to just knowing one thing. So maybe just try and stay with that as I'm talking, just perhaps touching back into what else is being known. Yeah, you can certainly know the sound of my voice, maybe the sounds of the birds, where you are or where I am coming through the computer. There's a lot happening in the present moment. And that's what we are looking to attend to in the practice. And to feel it, to know it in quite a relaxed, open way. And sometimes what we see when we attend in the present moment, two different things. One is we often see the mind going forward in the future, so anticipating what is going to be happening or might be happening a bit later on, maybe after the class, tomorrow, whenever it is. Or the mind goes into the past. So memories, perhaps in the form of thoughts or images in the mind. So there are different functions of mind that are going on all the time. And from this present moment perspective, we can recognize that happening, recognize the moment. So if you like, they're not a problem. It's not a problem. The past and the future mind moments. As long as we recognize them in the present, we know that they're happening. And the other thing that we can often see when we're present, we can see how actually often we're quite reluctant to just be present with what's happening. There's a sense of interfering, often trying to subtly or sometimes not so subtly change what's happening. Make the, if we're meditating, maybe make the breath a bit different, or try and make the us feel differently in metta practice. Whatever it is, it can be quite interesting in a way just to see that tendency to want things to be slightly different, or as I say, quite grossly different sometimes. And again, that can be known in the present moment. We can see, oh, the mind wanting something to be different. Sometimes it can be quite funny, what it does, but it's the same sort of mechanism, really. We stay with it rather than, or we learn to stay with it rather than following that. If only I could just be like this. If only the breath could be a bit deeper, or my concentration could be a little bit better, or whatever it is. So the present moment gives us a lot of scope to just recognize what's happening in a relaxed, spacious, open way. Experiencing natural quality of mind and mindfulness. That's the first thing. So the second thing is that the quality of effort or energy we use is crucial. And actually, we want to use the minimum effort and still be present. Often we're using a lot more energy, a lot more effort than we need to in practice, without really realizing it. And I think the opportunity in practice, where with its receptive nature, we're just looking to notice, to recognize what's happening, is that we see that doing, we see that trying, we see that using effort more than we might otherwise do. But maybe you think that's quite something to say, use the minimum effort. and that means that you can still be present. So let's do a little exercise. Some of you will have done this with me. I do it on most of the retreats that I do. So I'm going to hold my hands up here, but you can just put yours in a relaxed way so that you, yeah, I'm just doing it so that you can see what I'm doing. So put your hands together so that maybe the palms are touching in some places and the fingers are touching in some places. And you can make and sort of break that contact. And just feel those sensations. And just notice when you're present how much effort it takes, how much energy you need to just be recognizing, just be aware of those sensations. It's not necessarily going to be all the time, but when you notice. Okay, so does anyone think it takes a lot of energy? You can wave if you do. No, I can see some heads being shaken. No, okay, so that's generally generally what's said is that no, it doesn't take a lot of effort, and sometimes people will say it takes no effort at all. So this is where I think it's Analayo has said, the Bhikkhu Analayo says, sometimes right mindfulness takes the place of right effort. So when we're mindful, when we're present, that can be enough. That energy to be present, which is very, it's more about remembering to be present, or reminding ourselves to be aware in the present moment, than any extra sort of effort where we think we need. So sometimes I find that very helpful in practice to think about or to just check how much energy or how much effort I'm using. There's another little phrase that a friend of mine in Cambridge uses, Vimokshadaka. He talks about reducing unnecessary effort. He's written a book about Qigong and meditation, I think. And I think there's a lot of subtlety we can access, I think, when we are not throwing more energy, more effort at the practice than we need to. You know, we can gradually realize. I think probably at least once a year I realize, oh, I could still be putting less effort in then. And I've been doing this practice quite a long time, checking on the quality of effort. What we want much more than strong effort is a continuity of awareness. And that takes a type of energy that's patient and persistent. It keeps going, but it keeps going in a way that, in order to keep going, we have to not sort of tire ourselves out. So we just use a tiny bit of effort, but in a way that we can keep it up. It's an ongoing way. Whenever I talk about this, I always think about this song. I came across this, my favorite lockdown song. It's by a group called the Bengsons, and it's called the Keep Going On song. And I really recommend it. It's a lovely, lovely song. But I think it also has this sort of spirit of just keep going on, just keep going. And in these ways, this patient perseverance, patient persistence. Okay, I've got time to tell you about. So one of the other things I think with mindfulness, and one of the things I think that can tempt us into throwing a lot of energy at something or trying to be aware, trying to be mindful is when things are happening quite fast. Perhaps there's quite a lot going on. And then it's very tempting, rather than, in a way, accepting that maybe what we pick up will be, more broad brush strokes. We'll get the flavor of something or the feeling of something, and that's enough. We can tend to just rev up the effort at that point. So that's what we do. So I want to say something that just points to actually how much the mind can take in if it's relaxed and if it's quite open. And so pre-lockdown, I used to quite regularly go to classical music concerts in the Symphony Hall in Birmingham. Lovely thing to do. And quite often, it seemed like we had a run anyway of the music involved piano soloists. So within the context of a whole orchestra, you'd get this piano solo. As I'm sure you know, so pianists play incredibly fast. There's thousands of notes in a piece, but actually the mind, particularly when it's relaxed, can pick up all those notes. I mean, forget about the fingers that are doing amazing things, but actually the mind can take in it's very quick, the mind, and without working hard, without really working, but just relaxing, it can take in what's happening. So maybe think of that example as what the mind can do when we let it stay relaxed, and when we allow it to just sort of take things in, rather than in a way just doing more of that interfering or trying to fiddle with the experience, and we end up controlling a bit. So I think this quality of energy, quality of effort is a lot about feeling the awareness rather than doing it. Feeling the quality of mindfulness. So the third thing, so we've had mindfulness always happens in the present moment. And then the second thing, the quality of effort, energy that we use is crucial. And the third thing, we sometimes talk about awareness, or Bhante talked about awareness is revolutionary. Well, I think acceptance is revolutionary too. Acceptance of what's happening is what brings contentment and happiness to the mind. So I think it's a wisdom quality. If we really are able to accept what's happening, and that doesn't mean that there may be things that we actively do to change something, but in the moment it's there. We accept this is what is happening right now. So maybe one example would be physical pain. Some of you know I get a lot of migraines, so I get quite a lot of head pain. And even if I do take the drugs and if they do work, there's maybe quite regularly a couple of hours where there's, a little bit of pain or quite a significant amount of pain. And so that's when the opportunity, it doesn't mean that you don't take the drugs. But in the time when there is discomfort and there's nothing else that can be done, does the mind, or can the mind accept what's happening? Or is it going to argue with reality? Is it going to complain? Is it going to join in, if you like, with the suffering of the body? So sometimes the question I ask myself is the mind joining in with physical suffering? So I think acceptance as a quality that's willing to be with whatever's happening. even when it's unpleasant or unwanted. Those experiences are going to arise. They're part of human life. But acceptance is about not resisting what's happening. As I say, being willing to be with it, and willing is another of the words that I really, really like. So another little example, and this comes from the book. So in chapter 4, I think it is. Well, at the end of each chapter, I've got what I call mindful life moments. And they're where I talk about how I work with the practice myself. And I've drawn quite a lot of them from a blog that I wrote that I think went into the chat. And it'd be lovely if you wanted to check out the blog. There's various resources on there, as well as the blog pieces. So they're all about how I work with the practice. But the one in chapter 4 is about a particular visit to the dentist I had. I had some implant surgery at the dentist. And it was just a really interesting experience because I was watching the mind. I mean, it wasn't pleasant. And I had my mouth open probably for about an hour and a half, pretty much non-stop. So I was doing a lot of massaging on my jaw to stop them going into spasm. But the whole experience was interesting. Even the moments of fear or the moments of resistance that arose, because I was able to watch them and recognize what was happening. And that recognition, in a way, helps give some sort of space from the experience. But the main thing that was there was, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And the best way to be with this, there's no arguing with it. And it'll be worse if I sort of contract around it. So, okay, just lie back here and be curious about it. And there was a particular moment that I write about in the blog piece where there was a lot of drilling, and the drilling had been going on quite a long time. And I realized that there was no tooth to drill into because the tooth had been taken out a few months before, because with implant surgery, you take the tooth out and then you let the gum heal. So I had this moment of realizing that, oh, actually it was my bone that was being drilled into. And that was, I don't know, it was just part of the experience, but it was quite a nice moment having this bit of a surprise in a way going along. Not my usual sort of experience at the dentist. But yeah, I think acceptance helps us not argue with what's happening. Okay, so I've got time for the fourth thing, I think. So just call this what is the mind knowing, and how is the mind knowing? And this is pointing to the quality of clearly knowing, or sampajana, clearly knowing. I think this is also, Bhante talks about this, is this quality has more than a touch of insight about it. And I think this is where we can get a clearer sense of what it's like to practice mindfulness, and what it's like to practice mindfulness with a wisdom component, or a Dharma perspective. So I just want to give you a couple of contrasts to maybe just feel into or reflect on as I'm talking about them. Because I think awareness can, wisdom can show up in many different ways. There's many different facets. And there's, of course, we've got the 3 levels of wisdom. So that clearly knowing, clearly understanding can happen in different ways, different levels. Okay, so mindfulness, we can be perhaps we're mindful of the breath. Okay, so we're mindful of the breath. We are with the sensations of the breath. We're with them. We can feel the movement. Perhaps we feel different temperature associated with the breath. So we're clearly knowing the breath in a certain way. And that's the mindfulness end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, Bhante talks about, we can know the nature of the breath. So we'll know the qualities of the breath, its sensations and all that, but we also have some understanding of the nature, the impermanent nature of the breath, not in an intellectual way, but a more of an understanding. We'll understand the insubstantial nature. So that's what the nature is referring to. Or sometimes it's referring to Paticca Samuppada. So it's referring to the breath. This breath is, if you like, it's all it is are causes and conditions that are coming into creating this moment of experience. So you can see that's quite different. That, if you like, that clearly knowing in the sense of understanding the nature of something has a substantive difference to clearly knowing the breath, more through the sense experience of it, and being aware of those sense experiences. So another way, maybe we can be aware again through the senses. So perhaps aware of touch sensations. So the body sensations. So aware of the clothes against the skin. Perhaps again aware of temperature. Aware of tingling, different parts of the body. So we can be mindful of all of that. But when there's some degree of wisdom perspective or Dhamma perspective, we can also be aware of how we're relating to all those experiences, how we're relating. Maybe those sensations of tingling are when your foot's gone to sleep, and it can feel really intense. So perhaps it's that. So, and there's some sort of reaction in the mind away from that. It's experiencing those sensations as unpleasant. So knowing that too, that unpleasantness is happening in experience. So there's tingling, but how we're relating is, there's unpleasantness towards it. What's that like in the mind? So with whatever's happening, we can also know the relationship to it. And that's part of a broader practice of watching the mind, working with all different senses. One last one, a thought. So we can know a thought arising in the mind. We can know, perhaps we know the content of that thought. We can be mindful of that. But we can also clearly know a thought as a thought, how a thought feels in experience, how it feels in the mind. That has a different feel. And we can know things in such a way, clearly know them in that perhaps with mindfulness, we can still be identified with the content of the thought. Mindfulness and wisdom, there's that clear knowing without identifying with the thought. It's simply a thought arising, persisting for a small amount of time and disappearing. So how we know makes all the difference, knowing without identification. And I've got a couple of chapters in the book. Chapter 4 talks about right view, working with right view of experience. And chapter 7 is talking about how to recognize moments of wisdom in the mind, how to recognize those times of clearer seeing, but also how to recognize the delusive mind, what I call the moha mind. Moha is the Pali word for delusion or ignorance. It's really, really helpful seeing the mind that usually we're just so involved in. We're involved in our delusions. So being able to recognize them, yeah, it can be a lot of fun, actually. Yes, I'm running out of time. Probably spoken enough. So maybe I'll just say what else is in the book. So as well as these mindful life moments, each chapter has one of these blog pieces. There's also 1 or 2 exercises for each chapter, which are looking at how you can practice them outside of a meditation context, but just in a way they're just exercises to explore the material that's in the body of the chapter. And then the other thing is as a link to a led meditation. So each chapter has a led meditation that goes with it, which is roughly corresponds with the material in that chapter. There might be a couple of things that I say later. And actually, I meant to tell you the format of the evening, and I forgot to do that completely. So I've done the first bit, which is talking. The second bit is meditation. So I thought I'd lead you into a meditation. It won't be massively long, but just to give you an idea of how what I'm saying translates into on the cushion. And then there'll be, hopefully I'm thinking maybe 10-15 minutes at the end, just either to hear a little bit about your practice and also for any questions or comments that you've got just before we finish. Let's just have literally a minute or two just to stretch the legs, and then we'll sit. And I hope it's not going to start raining any harder than it is. It was very, very strong last night, and I was talking to people in Stockholm, and had to talk quite loud. Okay. Time finding your way into a comfortable position. And that may be formal meditation posture, it may not be. I think Zoom has perhaps opened up new possibilities for sofa meditations and all sorts of things. Meditating with pets a bit more. Yeah. So actually, in some ways, I think that's really helpful. It helps us. It helps us be at ease in our surroundings and perhaps loosen up ideas about the proper way to meditate or the proper meditation posture. But however you're sitting, just taking it really naturally. Allowing yourself time to come to the present moment. You might have your eyes open, might have your eyes shut, and either is fine. Seeing is just another of our senses that we can be mindful of. So it can be helpful, and you probably notice this happening, is just settling. As you settle into the present moment, you settle into the body. Perhaps you become a bit more aware of your physical posture. Or perhaps a sense of inhabiting your experience of the body. And settling back in that posture. You can think of relaxing into awareness, relaxing into mindfulness. And perhaps having the idea in the mind. Ideas are very influential in our practice. Having the idea that there's no particular aspect of your experience that you're supposed to be attending to. It might be that you anchor within the body or within the breath sensations. That's really fine and good. But we're also allowing the mind and body to be natural. And so you can notice where the attention goes. If your eyes are open, that might mean you notice a movement, the eye moving from one object to another. So the attention has been in one place and then it's moved. You might notice the attention moving from sensations in your hands, perhaps your hands touching, to a different body sensation. And then perhaps staying with sounds for a while, sound of the rain. So this is what attention does. Attention all the time is moving from one thing to another. And usually this is happening just outside of awareness. But what we're wanting to do in the practice is notice what attention is doing, allowing awareness to accompany that faculty of attending. And so we're not looking to reach out to experience or try and catch it all. Just staying quite relaxed and settled back. And just noticing where the attention is going and letting awareness accompany it. And this can be very delicate, like a butterfly moving from one leaf to another and another. So we're not directing the attention. We're just noticing it as it's drawn from one object to another. Being present to the movements in the mind. Being present to different sense experiences as the attention moves to them. And if you find yourself caught in lots of thoughts or a story, which is quite natural for the mind to do, just really noticing that moment when you remember mindfulness, when you wake up into awareness in the present moment. It's easy to chastise ourselves for having been lost, but it's just what the mind naturally does. And actually, in that moment of waking into mindfulness, we don't need to look back about what we've been lost in. We're already present. And we can enjoy and appreciate that. Every now and again, perhaps just checking the quality of effort or energy you're using. You might even put your hands together to feel those sensations, just to reconnect with that minimal quality of effort that's needed. Simply knowing what's happening now. What is the mind knowing? And you don't need to verbalize that to yourself. You might just have a clear, non-verbal recognition. Mindfulness is knowing sounds, knowing sensations, knowing thinking happening. And noticing any moments where there's some degree of acceptance of what is happening. And feel the quality of contentment that it brings along with it. And when you're ready, just starting to bring this practice to a close. And in your own time, just reorienting to being with others through the Zoom medium.